He did ask me to go with him for Hajj, and I said no. And he went, why? I says, do you understand about Hajj? When you go for Hajj, you're to come back and you're not to do any mistakes. Any mistakes you do on Hajj, scrubbed, everything wasted. I'm too young to go for Hajj. I'm bound to make some mistakes somewhere, somehow. That's why I don't want to go for Hajj. But he was very clever and he said to me, would you go for Umrah then? I went, yeah, I'll go for Umrah. So him and I went for Umrah. And I did go for Hajj later with his nephew and his wife. So I've done both. I know in his heart he wanted buried in Pakistan. But I loved him. I didn't want him buried in Pakistan. And if it's a fault, then God knows best. But I thought, I've seen graveyards in Pakistan, and they say, oh, your uncle and your chachi and your daddy and your dad are all there. Where? Somewhere there. I didn't want that for him. I wanted a grave for him where his family would go, stand by his grave, know that that's where the father was, and pray for him. And that's what I've done. So I hope he's not too angry. And there are other Muslims there beside him. I'm more Pakistani than some Pakistanis, I believe in my heart. I don't know why. I would be about 16 when I got into Islam in a big way. In those days there were very few Muslim men around, and certainly no Muslim women. I got married in 1954 and I got married to a Mr. Muhammad Nawaz Malik. He was a fantastic gentleman. I never had anything against him whatsoever, ever. We were the first Pakistani family to live in Pollockshield tenement buildings, number 5 Leslie Street, one up right, one up left, one up left, yeah. We were the first Pakistani family to live in Pollockshield tenement buildings, number 5 Leslie Street, one up right, one up left, one up left, yeah. The people we bought the house through thought that I was Polish because Malik is a Polish name, and so therefore we got that house. They weren't aware we were Asian. Now when we moved in there, it was all Jewish people or business people. So I wasn't very sure how that was going to go. We were standing out like a sore thumb. But I realised that we had to make our respect. You don't get respect on a plate. Respect you have to have, and you have to bring your family up in the same way. Then I thought how to get respect from my neighbours. That was another problem. We just moved in. And one day, we had a key for the cellar downstairs. In the olden days, there were coal fires, so we had a key for the cellar for the coal. And I went down to the door, and it was written on the door, "Keep out, police notified." So I came back up the stairs, and I said to my husband, "This is written on the door. Something's not right." He said, "Some child would have written it." And I went, no. One, it was written high up in the door. And the second thing was that the word notified is not a child's word. That's obviously the word of a person who's educated. So then my problem was I had to go to each and every door in my close. And I got to the very top. And there was a Mr. Russell, 6 feet tall like my husband. And he said to me, "Are you the person who's been stealing my coal?" I went, "Excuse me, not stealing, there's a mistake. The person who gave us the keys of the house obviously gave me the keys of your cellar by mistake. I will correct that with them. And what I want you to do is tell me how much coal do you think we've used belonging to you, and we'll replace it." And that's what happened. We replaced that coal and everything was quiet for a while. And then I thought that wasn't a good start. But a few months later, my husband heard a noise in the stair. And he opened the door, and Mr. Russell, feet up in the air, head down, he'd fallen on the stairs. So my husband picked him up, carried him up 3 stairs, opened his door, put him to bed, got his sister's phone number, phoned his sister and said, this is what's happened. I found out that your father's doctor is the same doctor as me, so I phoned the doctor and the doctor's on his way. And he was also 6 feet tall, so that was quite strange coincidence. All these 3 men were 6 feet tall. That passed off quite well, and she was very grateful and very thankful. I says, well, that looks a bit better than stealing coal. That looks good. She came down one night and knocked on our door. And she said, I'm very sorry. My father's fallen in the bathroom and he's behind the door. And there's no way I can get to him. I've not got the energy, the strength. And my father is shouting, go get Mr. Malik, go get Mr. Malik. He'll manage to pick me up. She says, I wonder, would he come and pick my father up? So, of course, Malik went up and picked his father up, put him to bed. The one thing I have to be honest about was, I know in his heart he wanted buried in Pakistan. But I loved him. I didn't want him buried in Pakistan. And if it's a fault, then God knows best. But I thought, I've seen graveyards in Pakistan, and they say, oh, your uncle and your chachi and your daddy and your dad are all there. Where? Somewhere there. I didn't want that for him. I wanted a grave for him where his family would go, stand by his grave, know that that's where the father was, and pray for him. And that's what I've done. So I hope he's not too angry. And there are other Muslims there beside him, so he's not alone. I think the family appreciate the fact. My son comes from London, he goes to the graveyard. My daughter comes from London, they go to the graveyard. I, whenever I want, go to the graveyard. Wash the stone, make sure it's clean, everything. Say our prayers, feed the birds, come back, feel happy. I would rather that than he's in Pakistan and don't know somebody's going to go to his grave or not. So I hope he forgives me for that. He did ask me to go with him for Hajj. And I said no. And he went, why? I says, do you understand about Hajj? When you go for Hajj, you're to come back and you're not to do any mistakes. Any mistakes you do on Hajj, scrubbed, everything wasted. I'm too young to go for Hajj. I'm bound to make some mistakes somewhere, somehow. That's why I don't want to go for Hajj. But he was very clever and he said to me, would you go for Umrah then? I went, yeah, I'll go for Umrah. So him and I went for Umrah. And I did go for Hajj later with his nephew and his wife. So I've done both. The first time I went for Umrah, it must be about maybe 15 years ago, more than that, 20 years ago. We went to stay with relations in Jeddah, and they took us out in air-conditioned cars just because they happened to be there. It wasn't that they specially had these cars, just it was their car. And they took us to Mecca first, and the next day we went to Medina. And in both of those occasions, it had rained before we went there, which I thought was really quite something. And the one other thing which stands out, there are 2 things that stand out in my mind. One, when you're on the motorway and it says, non-Muslims this side, Muslims that side. And I think, wow, I'm being honoured because I'm allowed to go. Nobody else is allowed to go, only Muslims are allowed to go on this road. So I felt quite happy about that. And the other strange thing that keeps coming to my mind, and I don't know if my thinking here is right or wrong, but when they talk about Lot, when God put these stones on top of him, and there's a hill on the way there, and there's lots of small stones there, and I often wonder, were these stones from that time, or is that just me thinking? I have no proof of that. I have no idea. I just can't help. Every time I read that surah, I think about that scene that I saw. And the other thing was, I remember that I went to do wuzu, and while I was doing wuzu, I slipped. And when I was going, I knew that the back of me was wet, but I didn't know if it was clean. And because you're in such an important place and you're saying your prayers, and I thought if somebody just puts their hand on me and says you can't say your prayers because your dress isn't clean at the back or something, that worried me. So when I finished the prayers and I was crying, and my husband, as always he is, took out a handkerchief and gave me it, and it was okay. But yeah, that was my experience of Umrah. We actually got to kiss the stone, which is quite unusual. And the other strange thing I remember about Umrah was, and I don't know if anybody else knows about this, there was a barrier that went round, and the men seemingly went on the inside and the women on the outside. But the day we went, because it had rained, the barriers had been taken away to one side. So everybody was going together. And that was why somebody pushed me and I got pushed towards the stone, and I kissed the stone because that happened to be there. A coincidence again.